Peake and Tim Kopra.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for coming. This is brilliant. What a warm welcome to London, and it's absolutely fantastic to be back here in the Science Museum. So I guess before we go into your questions and try and give you some answers and share the mission with you as much as possible, we'd better introduce ourselves. So I'm also delighted to be here with my NASA crewmate and friend, Tim Kopra. So, Tim, over to you.
So I had the good pleasure of serving with Tim Peake on board the International Space Station. My first flight to space was in 2009. I flew up on Space Shuttle Endeavour. I spent 2 months on board Space Station and came home on Space Shuttle Discovery, did one spacewalk. And then I launched with Tim Peake and Yuri Malenchiko in December as part of Expedition 46. We had 2 spacewalks while we were there, one of which was with Tim Peake, and then I commanded Expedition 47. We just got home 4 months ago.
And I was selected by the European Space Agency in 2008 and started working for them in September 2009 and trained for pretty much 6 years. I was assigned to Expedition 46-47 with Tim and Yuri, of course. And as Tim said, we launched on the 15th of December last year. And I was fortunate enough to be sent some video up, actually, whilst I was on board the space station of the party that was going on back here in the Science Museum. And I thought, as much fun as that Soyuz rocket launch was, I think actually you guys back here in the Science Museum were having more fun than we were, possibly. So anyway, Mission Principia, we would just like to really use this time to hand it over to you so that we can try and answer any questions that you might have about our mission, what we're up to, our training, our background, or the future.
Thank you very much, Tim. We have our first question over here.
Hi, my name's Amy Ann, and I've got a question for you, which is, how did you feel at the moment of the launch?
How did I feel at the moment of the launch? That's a great question, Amy Ann. Goodness me. Well, it's really exhilarating, actually. It was excitement, it was exhilaration. It wasn't really nerves or apprehension or fear or anything like that, because you've trained so long for this, and you are just so delighted that it's finally your time, your turn to go into space. And you're sat on top of 300 tons of rocket fuel, and you've been sat there for a while because you've been going through all of your checks and drills. And we actually get to listen to a little bit of music inside the spacecraft before we launch, just to kind of keep us, in a good frame of mind. And the last music they play was this great song by Europe called The Final Countdown, which you probably don't know, but it's a really good rock song, and it gets you in the mood for a rocket launch. So actually, by the time the boosters light, you are really excited, and then you just feel this amazing, powerful rocket lifting off the launch pad. And it's very slow at first. It doesn't go off with a big kick. The acceleration builds and builds and builds. As it gets lighter and lighter, as it burns all the fuel, of course, the spacecraft and the rocket gets lighter and lighter. So the acceleration builds and builds and builds, and you get pushed back further and further into your seat as that acceleration builds. It's the most fantastic ride you could ever expect.
I have a question over here. Over to you.
Hello, my name is Digby. I'm from Art Primary, and my question is, how long does it take to get to the IAS?
So I can answer that question. Actually, we get to the International Space Station very quickly now. It only takes 8.5 minutes to get to zero gravity. Our rocket has 3 stages, and so after 8.5 minutes, things start to float. And then we go around the planet 4 times, 4 orbits, and that's 6 hours. And so about 6 hours after we launch, we're docking to space station. So we wake up in Baikonur, and then we go to bed on the International Space Station.
Now, interestingly enough, actually, this morning at 9:05, were you at school by 9:05 or having breakfast maybe? I'm not sure. But whatever you were doing at 9:05 this morning, there were 3 people who were launching into space this morning in a Soyuz spacecraft. And they are currently, as we sit and talk, or stand and talk here now this afternoon, they're sat in that Soyuz spacecraft right now, orbiting planet Earth, going through a rendezvous to the International Space Station. It's the new crew going up there today.
So I've got another nice question over here.
Hi, I'm Lily, and my question is, when you were in the rocket, was it scary?
So when you were in the rocket, was it scary?
Okay, was it scary in the rocket? I think there's probably 3 areas of going into space which are scary, and that's launching into space. and that's coming back down through the Earth's atmosphere to planet Earth, the landing and the re-entry, and doing a spacewalk. And they're the areas where you really get a sense of being in a higher risk environment. But what we do in order to, take those fears and make sure that we get rid of them all is we train. And we are so well trained in all the emergencies that could possibly happen during the launch or during a spacewalk or during re-entry. And by training and training and training, that's why it takes 2.5 years to train just for a mission, you don't really have any fear by the time you actually get to do the mission, because you know exactly what to do if anything goes wrong. And actually, you end up not feeling nervous or apprehensive, but you end up launching feeling pretty confident.
Hi, I'm Harry, and this is a question for Tim Kopra. What was the first thing you did when you got on board the ISS?
Well, the very first thing we did when we got on board the ISS was hug our crew members, because we were happy to see them, and they were surely happy to see us. And then we had an opportunity to talk with our families, because we set up a camera, and it was like sort of a press event, but we got to talk with our families that had waited and watched the launch, watched us orbit, and then dock to the space station. And then after that, once you're on board and you finish some of those ceremonial things, like talking to your family and meeting the new crew, it's very important for us to get oriented with Space Station, because we have a safety briefing, kind of like what I heard for you guys. If something happens, here's the exit. And the same thing with Scott Kelly, who is our Space Station commander. He told us where things were located, and we had that first safety brief. And then we went to bed, because it was a really long day.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Shani, and my question is, how do you eat and drink in space?
How do you eat and drink in space? That's a really important question. And so all of our food has to come in either a tin or a metal pouch, something that we can put into an electrical food heater. And this just takes about 20 minutes. We will put cans of food in there, switch it on, and then it would warm things up. Or we could go to a water dispenser and we could get either cold water or hot water. So things like chicken soups or noodles and things like that, and vegetables that you could just add hot water to. We would eat those out of packets, and when we would open our cans. You can actually get some pretty nice food into cans and pouches and rehydrate it. But it does have a lot of salt taken out of it, because the salt isn't good for our bones in space. So some of it can taste a bit bland.
Hi, my name's Layla. This is a question for Tim Peake. Did you enjoy the food whilst in space?
Yes, I did enjoy most of food, but then again, you're talking to somebody who doesn't often get that excited by food. I mean, some people are really motivated by food, and I think if you're highly motivated by food, then you might not be very well suited for spaceflight. It's probably better if you can cope with average food for a long period of time. So yeah, some of the food was nice. Some of the food was just a case of, okay, well, it's all right. I'm just taking on calories.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Joseph. My question is, how did you go to the toilet on the ISS?
Oh, I guess I'll answer the toilet question. You have to ask the toilet question, right? I mean, it's one of these bodily functions. You have to figure out, how do you do that in zero gravity? And so our toilet is kind of a combination of a vacuum cleaner and a big can that has a plastic pouch in it. You can kind of figure out what that's for. But everything has to move with airflow, because you don't have any gravity. And so this long tube is what we use for liquid waste, and that can is what we use for the solid waste. And once the solid waste container is full, and you know that it's full because you can see it and smell it, you go ahead and close it up, you put it in the garbage, and then you put a new can in. But one interesting thing about the liquid waste, about our urine, is that we recycle about 80% of all the urine so that it turns into drinking water. And then from that urine comes some brine, and it gets put in this big canister, and then that gets thrown away too.
Yummy.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Layla, and I'm from Moriah Jewish Day School, and this is a question for Tim Peake. Is it fun floating around?
Hi, Layla. Yes, it's an awful lot of fun floating around. It does take a little bit of getting used to. And when you first get on board the space station, you actually feel quite clumsy, because you have to learn how to control your legs. and you mainly pull yourself along using your hands. And actually, in the Russian segment, it feels a bit more comfortable because the Russian segment's a little bit narrower diameter, and so it's a bit easier. The walls are just there and there. But in the forward section of the space station, the diameter's a bit larger. And if you find yourself in the middle of a big volume, in weightlessness, and you're not next to a wall, you can actually kind of get stuck and have to wriggle around like this until you find a handrail and a wall. But as you get better and better at living in weightlessness, you get very confident. You push yourself off a wall, you can float all the way down to the end of the space station, and it's a really fun environment to be in, because one minute you can be working down here in the floor, and then you just push yourself up and work in the ceiling or work on the walls, and you can use the whole volume of the spacecraft. You're not just confined to, like we are here, standing on our feet. But one interesting thing about living in space is that we don't wear shoes. There's no point in wearing shoes on a space station unless you're going to go running on the treadmill. So we just wear socks, and we use our feet to hook under handrails. So we're constantly kind of pushing off with our feet, hooking them under handrails, and then we get a stable foot position, and then we can use our hands to work.
Hello, my name's Killian Valev, and this question is for Tim Peake. How is there oxygen on the International Space Station?
Wow, how is there oxygen on the International Space Station? That is a very good question. So, Tim, you might be able to help me out here, but we have a couple of different sources of oxygen. Some of it actually comes up in visiting vehicles, and some of it comes up as water. And something that's really interesting about water, of course, water is liquid and it's made out of hydrogen and oxygen molecules. But if you use something called electrolysis, you can actually split water into hydrogen gas and oxygen gas. So the space station is one of those incredible environments where we're trying to recycle everything, like Tim said about the urine, and we're trying to recycle our water, and we're trying to use everything, all of our resources, we're trying to use them as much as possible. So we're using our water to split it into hydrogen and oxygen. And then that's another way of recharging our oxygen tanks into the atmosphere. But if we really need to supply large amounts of oxygen, we can bring it up in pressurized containers on cargo vehicles. In fact, Tim had to install one of these whilst we were up there on the station.
Makes you glad you don't have to have a delivery of oxygen in a box.
My name is Alex, and this is a question for Tim Kopra. How, where, and when did you sleep?
It's a great question, because not only do we work on board, but we have to live on board. That means we have to get sleep every day. And so we have a crew quarters, and our crew quarters is about the size of a large refrigerator, like a phone booth, really. And you would think it's really small, but it's actually just perfect size because everything is in reach. And it's the one quiet place that you have that's your own personal space, just like your personal bedroom. And on the wall inside this crew quarters is a sleeping bag, but it's a little bit different than your regular sleeping bag because if you didn't have a hood over the sleeping bag, you would float out. And so you have a hood, and sometimes you put your arms through 2 holes, and that way you can kind of find a comfortable place. And so we would go inside our crew quarters, zip ourselves up inside the sleeping bag with the hood, turn the lights out, and go to sleep. And I think some of us have a hard time sleeping in space because your body really craves having contact. It likes having that bed surface to lie against. And so, me personally, what I would do is I would move my body around, and so I would push my back against one part of the sleeping bag and put my knees up, and that felt almost like a bed.
Hi, my name's Fiona, and this is a question for Tim Peake. Do you know what all the buttons do on the shuttle and the space station, and how many are there?
Hi, Fiona. That's a great question. You're going to be terribly disappointed with the answer because it's probably going to be a no and a no. But I didn't get to fly in the space shuttle, so I'm going to get Tim to answer that one in a second. But on the space station, there are thousands of buttons. We have all sorts of different pieces of equipment, all sorts of different scientific experiments. We have computers everywhere. I think about 130 computers in total are powering various parts of the space station at any one time. So there are loads and loads of buttons and loads of systems. But the great thing is that we get trained very, very well. And although you might not know everything, you get to follow a procedure. So the ground teams make sure that they write the procedures very carefully. So if something comes up that we didn't happen to be trained on, we can simply run through the procedure and it will tell us exactly which buttons to push and how to operate that piece of equipment. So we've always got that to help. But space shuttle, Tim.
Yeah, space shuttle. You know, one of the big differences between the shuttle and station is that the shuttle was designed back in the 70s and the space station later. And so what we do with the space station typically is we'll go ahead and control space station from a laptop, which makes it much easier and it's easier to change. Whereas the shuttle, this was before you had laptops, and so everything had to be a manual switch or a manual button. And when you're asking how many buttons and switches we had on board shuttle, I was trying to give an estimate, and it's probably around 400 different switches and buttons. And each different system was in a different area. So one area was the auxiliary power unit, one was electrical systems, the engines, the computers, and then the life support systems on one side. And so it was very, very challenging to learn how to fly the space shuttle because of all these switches and all the manual things that we had to do.
As long as you knew which buttons not to press.
Exactly.
Hi, I'm Jack Leemans. This is a question for Tim Peake. Is it true that you had the best internet connection in space?
I think we possibly had the only internet connection in space, so I guess it was also the best. But we do have Wi-Fi throughout the space station, and that's something that we haven't always had it, but again, we're constantly kind of upgrading the space station. And the Wi-Fi, you know, we have the same problems up there that you might have at home. Sometimes the server crashes, and sometimes you have to reboot the laptops, and sometimes you can't get the iPads to sync with the servers. So yes, we go through all the pain and heartache that you do down here. But it's great. I mean, here we are talking about the fact that we actually have internet in space, which is quite incredible just to be able to say that. So it's very slow. You probably won't remember what dial-up was. And you won't even know what that means, but ask your parents what was dial-up like. And that's pretty much what the internet is like on the space station.
Hello, my name is Thomas, and this is a question for Tim Peake. How is that ISS controlled?
How is it controlled? Do you know what? Actually, if you're happy, I'm going to ask Tim to answer that question, because Tim was actually trained in the US laboratory on the attitude, guidance, navigation, and control systems.
No, it's a very good question. So space station mainly is actually controlled by the ground and by programs, because we want to be able to dedicate the time to doing science. And the one thing that the crew members can do on board that the people on the ground can't do are all the different science experiments. And so we have this tremendous team of people on the ground that are always looking at controlling our vehicle. And it's kind of bizarre how we control it. We have these big gyros. It's a big weight, and it spins really fast. And by doing that, it can control the attitude of the station. And so it uses both these big gyros that spin super fast, like 6,000 times per minute. And then you have some engines on the very back of space station, and they can fire to help change the attitude of the space station. So those are the main things that we use. But it's very complicated too, because you have big solar rays that stick out, you have the radiators, and all that has to come into play because all the systems are interconnected. And we have very talented people on the ground that help make that happen.
And the space station actually is constantly changing its attitude. It never sits still, because it flies around planet Earth like this. And in order to do that, it has to always be pitching down. We're going so fast, 17,500 miles an hour. And so the space station is always pitching down, so that our Earth windows, like our cupola windows, they're always facing Earth. So the whole space station is always facing Earth. And if it didn't pitch down, it would fly around the space station, it would fly around planet Earth like that. And 1 minute, say up here, you'll be looking out this window into space, and then you'd look out the same window down here, and you'll be looking at planet Earth. So we don't want that. We want the space station always pointing at planet Earth. So it's always changing its attitude.
Hi, my name's Lilia. What provides electricity for the International Space Station?
I can talk about the electrical system. So we have huge solar arrays. We have 8 of them on board space station. And so this space station solar array, it can rotate like this, and it can also rotate like this. And what you want to do is face that solar array exactly so that it's facing the sun. And when you do that, you can get the most energy. But it's very tricky because we're going around the planet every 90 minutes. And about half of that time, about 45 minutes is in the sun, and about 45 minutes is in the dark. So what that means is that when we have the sun, that's great. We use that power. But during that time when we don't have the sun, the excess power is put into batteries. And those batteries get charged up so that when it's dark outside, we use the batteries for our energy.
It was something that Tim and I had to do during our spacewalk. The space station had lost 1/8 of its power, electrical power, because there was a box that's a little bit like a circuit breaker at home, and that had broken on one of the solar panels. And so we had to go out there and change that box so that we could restore the station back to its full electrical power.
Hello, my name is Finley, and my question is, what was the aim of the Principia mission?
Where is Finley? Sorry, I'm hearing your voice, but I'm not seeing you. Just to say hi.
Over here.
Ah, there. Okay, hi, Finley. What was the aim of the Principia mission? Well, you know, any mission to space, really, as astronauts, we are trained all pretty much to the same level to go up there and be an effective crew member on board the space station. And what that means is that you join the crew and you run the experiments for 6 months that are coming up, and you get to participate in spacewalks if they happen to come in your increment, and you get to do robotic arm operations if you happen to have visiting vehicles, which we do. All these kind of tasks that astronauts get involved in. So in that respect, I was just trained as an ordinary space station crew member to do all of these jobs. But Principia is really the name for the European Space Agency mission. And so in terms of the European mission, we really wanted to try and make it something a bit special for the UK, because it was 25 years since we had our first British astronaut, which was Helen Sharman, and she flew to the Mir space station. So with Principia, it was a bit of a celebration of the fact that, hey, the UK has another astronaut, we're involved in human spaceflight, we're participating in the space station program, and so we wanted really to try and share that mission as much with your generation and reach out to the sort of younger, the future scientists and engineers of tomorrow, and try and run as many competitions and activities for you to get involved in and share the mission.
Hello, my name is Mia. How long does it take you to exercise?
We exercise about 2.5 hours every day, so a lot of exercise. And it's very important because one of the strange things about living in zero gravity is if you don't put load on your bones, which you get just by walking around, then our bones lose calcium, which means that our bones are getting weaker and weaker over time. And so we would spend about 1.5 hours on a weightlifting machine called a resistive exercise device. Fancy word, but what it is, it's a platform we stand on, and we lift a bar, and we can change the setting with this crank handle, and it would make it heavier or lighter. And we tried to get stronger and stronger while we were on board. And I think actually most of us come back from space station stronger than when we left. We can lift more weights when we get back. And then we also would be on a treadmill. The treadmill is kind of strange too. How do you run in space? Because it's zero gravity, and you don't have the gravity to keep you down. So we have a harness with some bungee cords that pulls us down, and it's a little bit uncomfortable because normally when you walk around, your weight is even and on your feet, and you don't feel anything pulling down on your shoulders. But with the harness, it pulls down on your shoulders, it pulls down on your waist, and so it's a little bit uncomfortable. So we would run for about 30 minutes at a time, and that way we could get our heart working stronger. And the same with the bicycle. We put on regular bicycle shoes, and you don't really need a bicycle seat because you're floating, and we would hold on to handles and then bicycle for about 30 minutes at a time.
Hi, my name is Flo, and my question is, how long did it take you to adjust to weightlessness, and what tricks can you do in zero gravity?
Hi, Flo. Well, Tim adapted much quicker than I did, and this is something I think that is remarkable about the human body. It remembers your experience, and so if you've flown in space before, like Tim had, he got on board the space station and you know, almost straight away was just pushing himself around and having fun, and I was kind of holding on to handrails thinking this feels really weird, getting used to it. But it doesn't take that long. I mean, really, after about a week, you're pretty comfortable pushing yourself around and floating around space station. And yes, you can do lots of fun tricks. You can do somersaults, and we used to kind of challenge ourselves as to if you could get from one side of the laboratory to the other without hitting things. And so yes, it doesn't take a long time before you can start having a lot of fun in weightlessness.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alicia. What is the most exciting part about going around the world 90 times a day?
Well, I think we can both answer that question because there are a lot of things that are very exciting about living on space station. Probably the most exciting thing about going around the planet, we go around 16 times a day, 90 minutes each time we go around, is looking through the windows because our planet is absolutely beautiful. I think you saw some of the images, some of the photographs that we've taken from on board, and it really gives you this appreciation for how beautiful our planet is, how diverse the planet is, and how much it changes over time. But also, one of the things that for me was very special was when you look out past Earth and you see how black it is, it really gives you a sense of how alone we are and really the need for us to be able to take care of our planet because it's all that we really have.
Hello, my name is Aya. What does space look like?
Hello, Aya. What does space look like? That's a great question because space does change. As Tim said, when you look out at space, it's very, very black. And actually, in the daytime, when the sun is on the space station, or certainly when we were out on the spacewalk and the sun was up, the amazing thing is that the sun down here, we always see a yellow sun, and we grow up drawing a yellow sun. But the sun is actually not yellow. It's only yellow once it's passed through our atmosphere, and then it looks yellow to us. Out there in space, the sun is white. It's the whitest, brightest white light that you would ever see. And so when we have the sun shining, space just looks absolutely black, and you can't see any other stars, you can't see any other planets because the sun is so bright. So you just have this vast blackness, the blackest black you'll ever see. And then as you go into Earth's shadow, then space just becomes incredible because that's when all the stars come out. You can see the Milky Way rising, you can see planets rising, and it becomes just as beautiful as you see the stars from down here on Earth. If you can find somewhere that's really, really dark and you can enjoy a dark, starry sky, that's how we see it up in space.
Hello, my name is Cutler, and I want to ask, how do you get from inside the ISS to the outside without losing any air?
Oh,
that's a great question.
It's a great question. It's a very observant question, right? Because when you watch the movies, it seems like the astronauts just go out into space and it's very simple, but it's not. It's very, very complicated. In fact, when we do spacewalks, we have to plan very far in advance if we can because it takes lots of time to plan out the actual work outside, but also to choreograph, to organize all the different tasks that we have. So it takes a few hours to go outside. First of all, we go inside what we call the equipment lock, and we get in our spacesuits. We have to close a hatch, and we reduce the pressure inside there. So like scuba divers, when scuba divers do their dives, they have to be very careful about how long they stay down below because they have to worry about the nitrogen in their blood. And so when we take the pressure down before we do the spacewalk, what we're trying to do is get rid of the nitrogen in our blood so that we don't get sick. So once we do that step, we go inside the crew lock, and now we're still at a regular pressure. And your question was, how do we do this without losing all the oxygen and all the air? So once we're inside that crew lock, and it's really tight, there's just enough room for 2 crew members. In our case, we had a big box that we had to carry too, so it's very cramped. We close that hatch, and we use a pump, and we pump all the air out as much as we can back into space station. And that last little piece, we dump that out into space. And then once it's dumped out into space, we've opened up that crew lock into a vacuum, and we can open the hatch and go out and do our work. So we try to save as much of the air as we can.
Hello, my name is Naya, and this question is for Tim Peake. How long do you spend on your space walk?
Hi, Leia. Oh, sorry.
How did it feel to do a spacewalk?
Right. Okay. How long did we spend, and how did it feel? Unfortunately, we didn't spend quite as long as we'd wanted to because there was a problem with Tim's suit, and it started having water come into his helmet. And in fact, I'll let Tim tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But how does it feel on a spacewalk? Well, Tim had gone out the hatch first, and it really follows on from the previous question. You know, we'd got the crew lock to a vacuum. Tim opened the hatch and went out first, and then I passed him this big box down, and I passed him all the other equipment that we were going to use on the spacewalk, and he secured that. And then it was my turn to come out. And it's amazing because when you drop down and you look down at the planet beneath you, and all you're wearing is just a spacesuit, and you have a thin visor, it can be very intimidating. And you come out, and I was hanging around underneath the airlock, and Tim had to go off and put an anchor point down. And I had a few minutes, about 4 or 5 minutes, just to really get used to how it feels being in a spacesuit, how you can move around, and to enjoy the view of planet Earth as well. But really, at that point, it felt very calm. It felt very relaxing because we were simply just doing what we had trained so long for. And we were actually really pleased to be outside because you never know you're going to get a spacewalk until you actually open the hatch and get to go outside. So at that point, I was just very excited, very happy to have had the chance. But Tim, do you want to talk about your helmet situation?
Sure. I would like to add, though, that just like Tim said, once you've done all the training and you're ready for the spacewalk, you're just really excited to go outside and do work. But it's just an amazing view. You would think that just looking out the window would be about the same as doing a spacewalk, but when all you see is everything from your visor like this, no obscuration with your field of view, it's just amazing to be able to see your planet that way. So when I was working, after we had finished this big circuit breaker change out, I was replacing a vent, and I looked up and I saw a big bubble of water inside my helmet, which is a bad thing to have water in your helmet. But there was a previous crew member who had a lot more water in his helmet, which was a little bit dangerous. In our case, we had planned for it so that if we ever had a circumstance with water in the helmet, we knew what to do. And so we have a checklist, and we looked at our checklist. We talked to our crew on the ground, and they helped us get back inside, and we were back inside the airlock in about 20 minutes. And that's the reason that our spacewalk was about 4.5 hours instead of typically about 6.5 hours.
Hello, my name is Amelia. My question for you is, what personal items did you take to space with you?
Hi, Amelia. We get about a large shoebox size to take up of personal items. And it's a good question because you have to think a long time in advance of your mission because you have to pack your bag up and your bag has to be ready. It probably launches to space maybe as much as 6 months prior to you going to space. And you have to deliver all of those things at least 6 months ahead of that. So maybe about a year before you even launch into space, you've packed your bags. So you imagine packing your bags today for a trip that you're doing in a year's time. You have to get kind of plan ahead and try and get it right. So I took up a few fun things that I knew that might happen during the mission. I knew I wanted to run the London Marathon, so I took up things like my marathon running shirt and a few other T-shirts and things that I wanted to wear. I took up some photographs of friends and family so that I could have them in my crew quarters because it's nice to obviously try and decorate your crew quarters and make it a little bit like a bedroom and make it a little bit cozy for you and a bit more personal. And also something that was really special was Helen Sharman, who I mentioned as our first astronaut. She had given me a book that she had taken to the Mir space station back in '91, and it had been signed by all of her Mir space station crew, and it had been stamped. And she wanted me to take it to the International Space Station as well, so that was very special.
Hi, I'm Kyla, and would you like to take your family into space?
You know, I would not like to take my family into space because space and human space exploration is very, very important, but it's also hazardous. And this is a job for me that I've selected, but I don't think my wife wants to go, and I'm pretty certain my kids don't want to go either, so I think it's better for them just to stay home.
Zacchaeus, what is your favourite memory in space?
Favorite memory in space? It has to be, really for me anyway, the moment when I went outside the space station for the spacewalk, because it's just such a lasting memory. It was something I dreamed of doing, and I tried not to get my hopes up about a spacewalk because there's not every astronaut gets to do one, and many things in the program can go wrong and stop you doing a spacewalk. But secretly I was really hoping to get the opportunity to do one, and the first moment that you go outside the space station is very special. special, and it is incredible, as Tim said, to see the planet when it's just in front of you and through a thin visor. It was absolutely the most amazing thing. And to have, in our case, we had about 10 minutes when we got outside and we were ready to do the electrical box change out. We got there early, and so mission controller told us that we had about 10 minutes to wait and hang out and wait for the sun to go down, because we couldn't touch anything by the solar panels until the sun had gone down. And I don't think any astronauts have ever been told, hang out for 10 minutes and take photos. So it was a very, very special moment to be able to enjoy that outside the space station.
Hello, my name is Harrison, and what was your favourite thing being an astronaut?
Favorite thing being an astronaut? I think we could probably both answer that. Probably the spacewalk is a pretty amazing thing. But, in addition to that, because we spent some time talking about spacewalks, being able to fly in a Soyuz spaceship is pretty darn cool. I mean, you're flying in a little spaceship that you can manually control. And both Yuri Malenchko and I were trained to control this manually, both for the rendezvous and docking and also for the descent. And so to be able to pilot a spaceship, I think, is pretty darn cool.
Hi, my name is Isla. And what did you miss most about being in space?
Well, Isla, I think the thing I miss most is friends and family. And as Tim mentioned there, of course, they're very special to us. And being apart from your friends and family is very difficult, especially when you're in an environment where you can't just go home quickly if something goes wrong, either if something goes wrong with you or if something goes wrong with your loved ones back on Earth. So it is a situation where you're kind of a little bit worried about your family back home, and that's what you miss the most. But in addition to family as well, for me it was fresh air. I love the outdoors. I love running, cycling, rock climbing, going hill walking, that kind of thing, and camping. And so to not be able to have a change of atmosphere, it's the space station inside is just like we're sitting now in this room. It's about this kind of temperature, it's this pressure, it's this kind of atmosphere. We do have a bit higher carbon dioxide level, but other than that, it's just like being in this room. And so to actually to live in a room, if you imagine, for 6 months, you kind of want to go outside and take a walk in the fresh air.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Samson, and my question, and this is for both of you. My question is, would you like to go to Mars?
I would like to go to Mars, but I hope that when we go to Mars, we get there much faster than our current plan. I think right now we talk about 6 to 9 months to get to Mars, but that's a long time. And we both spent 6 months on board space station, and even though you can stay pretty strong and you can feel pretty good when you come back home to Earth, I think taking that long to get to Mars and then have to work on the planet's surface and then come back would be really, really hard on your body. And also, I think if you consider how long it would take, that much time is risky too, because the longer you take, the more radiation you're exposed to. It also means that the equipment you have on board could break. So I think we have to get there very fast. And once we learn how to get to Mars quickly and we learn how to build habitats with really good life support systems, they take care of all the carbon dioxide and be able to reproduce food and take care of our water and do it very, very efficiently. And then I think we're ready to go to Mars. I'd love to go.
Thank you.
And likewise, yes, I completely agree with Tim. I think it would be fascinating to go to Mars, but it has to be, also right for you at the right time of your life to make that kind of commitment in terms of risk and in terms of time away from family.
Hi, my name is Chelsea, and I'm from Mariah, and I'd like to ask both of you, why did you want to become an astronaut?
Why did I want to become an astronaut? Well, I guess my background is fairly similar to Tim's in the fact that we were both military aviators and we were both test pilots. And so I'd grown up flying aircraft, being very passionate about aviation, and also loving space from an early age. And when you work in that environment, and certainly working in the test pilot environment, you do work closely with the space industry as well. We share many common technologies. And so I saw, an astronaut as being almost the pinnacle of a test pilot's career. It seemed like almost a logical next step as a test pilot to try and aspire to be an astronaut. But it all stemmed back really from, being your age and looking up to the stars and having a passion and a desire to explore and to get out there.
In my case, I was 6 years old when we were landing men on the moon. And I think every 6-year-old, when I was a kid, wanted to be an astronaut. And I was just really inspired by what the United States was doing to land these men on the moon. And I thought that exploration was just an amazing thing, and it really excited me. But I think as I got older, I realized, hey, that's a really difficult job to get. There aren't very many positions for this. And I didn't think that it was realistic. But then when I was in college, we had some Apollo astronauts who had gone to my college come and speak to all the folks that were in attendance there. And it made me realize, hey, even though I have in the very first year of this college and haven't done any of the curriculum, haven't studied hard in college yet, these same men that were talking to us had done the exact same things that I had done. And so it really motivated me to work hard in all of my classes. And thankfully, my career path was very similar to Tim's. It worked out, and that lifelong dream was able to work out.
Wonderful, thank you.
Hi, my name's Rebel, and when did you first train to become an astronaut?
When did I first train to become an astronaut?
Yeah.
Well, I started training in 2009. And I joined 5 other colleagues from the European Space Agency, and we went through a 14-month training course. And really that basic astronaut training is like going back to school, which is quite hard to do when you're in your late 30s, to kind of go back to school again and to have to sit and study and study and study. And one of the things we have to learn right away is Russian language, because as Tim said, we have to fly in a Soyuz spacecraft, and everything in the spacecraft is in Russian. There's no English documentation, and the spoken language to the mission controllers is in Russian as well. So we go back to school, but it's not just about learning Russian, it's about learning all these different subjects. And as an astronaut, really, you're kind of like a jack of all trades, which means you have to try and know as much as you can about many, many different subjects. And I think that's one of the hardest things about being an astronaut, is to try and retain all of this information, because we are the ones who have to work on the computers and try and fix them if they're broken, or the electrical systems, or maybe the plumbing systems, or anything on board the space station, as well as running all the science experiments and robotic arm and spacewalk. So there's lots and lots of information coming in during this training period. So for me, it took about 6 years since joining the space agency and to launching into space. And Tim had obviously been an astronaut for longer than that.
Hello, my name is Eloise, and how could you summarize your experience in space in 3 words?
Wow, that's a tough one. The hardest question of the day. Three words? That's really tough. What do you think, Tim?
Well, I could
Take
do it
your
in
time.
2. I could do it in 2. Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about amazing, and I get 3 words out of this because it's hyphenated. Amazing and life-changing.
Was that cheating? No, that was allowed.
Where's the English teacher?
Okay, everybody, can we give both these extraordinary Tims a massive round of applause? I think you can be louder than that. It's Tim Peake and Tim Kopra!